I'm here with Dr. Patrick Porter, and he is the originator of the Brain Tap. And we're at a seminar this weekend where I get to hang out with him, which is very exciting. I'm a big fan of his. So Dr. Porter's work helped me with a 40-year history of insomnia, and literally in 5 weeks. 40-year history of insomnia that has not returned. And Dr. Porter, can you explain to me, can you explain to them what was going on and how you were able to help me?
Well, I think for most people what's happening is the brain gets habituated to high levels of stress, which is in our everyday life now with the way the world is moving, even with digital technology, with busy lifestyles. Everybody's go, 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 and there's no downtime. So the brain gets habituated to being in beta consciousness, which is the wide awake state, instead of in sleep. And then when we go to sleep, what happens is that day-to-day activity can cause a lot of inflammation in the body, and the brain starts to experience it. And when people go to sleep, their brain literally wakes up instead of goes to sleep. And it's actually we train ourselves not to sleep. So because we trained ourselves, whether it was through thoughts, traumas, or toxins, one of those three, something happened or some combination of them that might have happened, or just the life stresses, then what we need to do is train the brain again the same way that it got into the problem, out of the problem. So with the brain tapping system, whether someone's using the app alone or they're using it with the headset, what's happening is it's guiding them. What it did for you in 5 weeks is every day as you trained your brain, you were training it to go back through a natural sleep cycle. Then the brain says, oh, I get it. I need to go from beta to alpha to theta to delta and back. So as we retrain our brain, now some people actually will do it in 1 day. I mean, we've had emails at the office, but some people it takes even longer than 5 weeks. So we don't want to, every person is different, every brain is different. So.
Well, as you and I have talked, there are a lot of factors that go into people not having good sleep. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think my trigger was when I started getting my period. I think the hormonal issue was my initial trigger. And what happened was, I developed all these other hormonal symptoms, but because I didn't sleep for so long, that once I did balance my hormones, that my brain was so used to being out of whack, for better term, I was so used to being in my head all the time that I couldn't just reset it on my own.
So, in that case, we would have a trauma happen to the body. The thoughts followed the trauma and then locked it in. We would call that a pattern or a delta imprint, if it's an unconscious pattern. So as you change that delta imprint, what happens is we have to rewrite that program. Obviously you didn't want to write that program. So the body's always trying to cope, or the brain as well. So what happened in that case is, even though I like to tell a story of what happened with Pavlov and the dogs, because everybody knows about the ringing of the bell, right? But the study went on, and they actually found out that the dogs eventually would salivate just on time. So think about what happens to most people in the afternoon when they get stressed out. They'll go have a coffee instead of doing a nap or training their brain to shut down. Naps are really good for us, but people don't take the time to do them because they feel like they're a waste of time.
Or they're at work.
Or they're at work, yeah. So part of it is just, how do we get people out of the sympathetic overload? And when you have the emotional experience and the high stress, most people don't know it, but they're running around with low-grade PTSD, from something that happened to them, and then the brain habituates to it. And the brain always wants to solve its problems. Sometimes there is no solution. It's just something that happened. There's a pretty neat book out there called "Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People?" And people ask that question all the time. It's just the way life is. Because life doesn't know good or bad, just knows these are experiences, but our brain makes it so. It figures out. So in your case, whatever the cause was, you don't really have to know the cause. You might know the cause because you've done a lot of research into it, but the reality is that we need to train the brain to take each day differently. As a kid, I like to tell people that it's summer now, so summer used to last forever when you were a kid.
Right.
Now it's like, oh man, are you kidding? We're almost through June. because our brain processes memories differently as we get older than we do when we get younger. We have those neural pathways. I've heard it described before, like running through a field that's all grown up, and you have all this resistance, but as we get older, there's pathways, so we go through those fields faster. But that can also be negative because we get those patterns, those ruts, and sleep happens to be one of them. They say that 1/3 of the population in America is having problems sleeping, and we know we can help that with brain tap. It's just how do we get them to suspend their disbelief long enough to at least give it a try.
Right. So what's interesting is when I was in chiropractic school, one of my friends who knew a lot about herbs said to me, "Oh, you should do skull cap." Because one of the things I described was like I was always in my head. I felt like there was like a little hamster on a wheel inside my head with my thoughts that I just couldn't turn off. I was just like always going, and it would drive me crazy. And I tried basically alcohol and other things to try to turn my brain off, but that's not very healthy.
Right.
I tried the skull cap, which did nothing. And then when I had my brain waves evaluated, of course, my beta was extremely high. So it totally tied into, what I now know.
Just as a point for the listeners so they understand is that when you're in high beta, there's a corresponding cortisol response. So cortisol is a master hormone. It tells the body that we're in fight or flight, which means the digestion, relax, reboot, all those systems of the body, heal the body, those are all put on hold, because it thinks there's something really bad going on. So that means it doesn't matter what you ingested.
Right.
It went right through your digestive system. Now, if you could have relaxed, like with the brain tap back then, and took that supplement,
It might have worked.
Yes, because the body, that's why a lot of people say, well, I tried vitamins, I did this. Sometimes that works alone, because that dealt with the trauma or it dealt with the toxins. So, some supplements will do that. But other times, especially when it has to do with the brain, and the overriding factor of the brain is it balanced? Do we have the brainwave frequencies? Like when we're awake, we should have a good mix of beta and alpha, which means that we're able to concentrate and focus, but we're also able to imagine, interpret, predict. We're always predicting our future. We're always predicting when we're driving. That's why you can drive across town sometimes. You go, I don't remember driving because you were you knew where you were going. Your brain kind of went on autopilot. You got to that destination because it already had driven that route so many times. It said we can think of other things while you take care of driving. It's not really that safe, but we do it all the time. So when there's a pattern interrupt, like a trauma or a toxin or whatever is happening where your thinking is bad, what happens unfortunately for some people is the minute they go to sleep, they haven't listened to themselves all day. And in fact, most of us would never be friends with the person who spoke to us the way we speak to ourselves.
Right.
We would fire that friend.
Right.
So we have to start teaching our brains, our own self-talk, to be more self-compassionate, and so that we can, people are going to make mistakes. I mean, we're so easy to forgive other people, but we're really hard on ourselves. So that sometimes when we go to sleep at night, that's when that critic shows up. And we really want to train that critic to be more of a self-soothing, power voice. It says, hey, it's time to go to sleep. Let's just put the past where it belongs. Forgive anybody who needs forgiveness. That's why I think prayer became so popular. Beside the fact that there's a lot of positive benefits to it spiritually, but there's a lot of positive benefits physically, because now we've set the tone. And I tell people if you watch a scary movie before you go to bed, you're going to dream that movie.
Right.
So the last thing you go to bed, you don't have to be, whatever religion you are is fine, but I think you should set your intention for sleep. And I like to do kind of like what Einstein would do. He said, these are my problems. I want my subconscious to give me some solutions and give me some dreams to fill it, because you've got the most powerful computer on earth working for you. Let's get that brain working and developing these programs that bring about results instead of failure.
Well, and I was definitely in fight or flight. That was definitely an issue for me. And I had digestive issues. I had cold hands. All those other things that come with someone who is chronic stress. So, now that I understand all this, it really tied in together nicely. But yeah, so that's for sure what was happening, and so many people are not aware of this whole brainwave thing, and they're constantly, throwing valerian root and all these other all this other stuff, and they're not getting the results they want.
Right, or they're being medicated, and then they're getting a chemical sleep, but they're not getting the rest, the relaxation they need. Just because they're not awake doesn't mean they're getting the rest and recovery that they need. So part of it is just training the brain to shut down. That's a natural process, and wake up in the morning recharged, rejuvenated. So when people meditate, which is a good thing, a lot of times they don't know how to meditate, or it's too difficult for them to meditate, and then it becomes worse because that critic shows up and they start basically empowering that negative self-talk. So we want to empower them with positive self-talk. And I know that you linked earlier, they can link and get a 7-day free trial and just try for themselves. I mean, even without the BrainTap headset, we've had over the years so many people get results with sleeping because there's techniques in there, learning techniques. So you learn these triggers that you can use for yourself. So when you're laying in a hotel room, or or you're at a family's house or friends, and maybe the bed isn't as comfortable, at least you have a way you can put yourself into a deep state of delta is the best. That's the deep sleep state.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on the meditation thing, because for years, my husband used to be a yoga teacher, and we would try to meditate together, and I never had a problem with it, but I just couldn't shut my brain off to meditate, and now I can, because I've done the BrainTap. So now my brainwaves are balanced, so I can sit down and I can meditate like that, where I couldn't do it. For years, I would get so frustrated, but again, I just couldn't shut the thoughts off.
Right, so it's all about training. Most people have never been trained. We're told they just go in and go to sleep. And, we've seen how that's gotten us. Now, when I was a kid, one of the rites of passage was always, especially in the summer, was to see the flag and listen to the Star Spangled Banner. And the TV would go off because there was only 3 channels, or in that. Now there's 24-hour news cycle. We have texting 24 hours a day. People can email you, all this stress. So part of it is just making yourself a priority, setting aside the time to learn to go to sleep again. And, like you said, you got help within 5 weeks. So, it can happen. And we find that once you empower yourself, it's like any knowledge, just like mathematics. Once you learn how to add 2 plus 2, you don't have to go back to your teacher and say, hey, how do I add 2 plus 2? So it's an empowering program. And then what we find is that when people find out they can help themselves in that way, they can move on to other things and start improving their lives in all the other ways that we have available.
Yeah, and the other thing is I feel like I've become an expert on this now because of my own history. So when I work with people that have sleep issues besides the BrainTap, which I always recommend, there might be a couple of supplements that they need to help, like boost their adrenals if they've had it. If someone's not sleeping for 40 years, their adrenals are shot.
Right.
So anyway, thank you, and I am going to share the link in the comments if you want to try 7 days of the audio version, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.